The water of Lake Michigan is a piercing, crystalline blue, so clear it often masks the graveyard resting beneath its surface. While the world whispers of the Bermuda Triangle's tropical disappearances, there is a stretch of water in the American Midwest that is arguably more cold-blooded and infinitely more silent. Between Ludington and Benton Harbor, Michigan, and Manitowoc, Wisconsin, lies a geometric void known as the Lake Michigan Triangle. It is a place where clocks stop, compasses spin in frantic circles, and human beings simply cease to exist. The night the sky swallowed 58 souls, the date was June 23, 1950. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 2501 was a routine commercial flight, a DC-4 propped up by 4 massive engines, carrying 55 passengers and 3 crew members from New York to Seattle. At the helm was Captain Robert Lind, a seasoned veteran of the skies. As the plane hummed over the dark expanse of Lake Michigan near Benton Harbor, the weather turned. Lind checked his instruments. The air was thick with electrical tension. At 11:37 p.m., Lind's voice crackled over the radio, requesting permission from the Minneapolis control tower to drop his altitude from 3,500 feet to 2,500 feet. He didn't explain why, but the urgency in his voice was unmistakable. Permission was denied due to other traffic in the area. Lind acknowledged the transmission. That was the last sound ever heard from Flight 2501. Within minutes, the plane vanished from the radar. It didn't fade, it didn't descend. It was simply gone. The ensuing search was the largest in Michigan's history. Coast Guard cutters and sonar-equipped vessels scraped the lake floor, expecting to find a massive fuselage and the remains of 58 people. They found nothing. No wings, no engines, no seats. Only small, eerie fragments began to wash ashore days later, bits of upholstery no larger than a hand. And human remains that were so thoroughly pulverized, they looked like they had been through an industrial grinder. To this day, the main wreckage of Flight 2501 has never been located. It remains the deadliest aviation mystery in Great Lakes history. A massive aircraft vanished into a hole in the sky. The locked door, the case of Captain Donner 13 years before the plane vanished. The Lake Michigan Triangle claimed a victim in a way that defies the laws of physics. On April 28, 1937, the freighter O.S. McFarland was plowing through the icy waters of the Triangle, carrying a heavy load of coal to Port Washington, Wisconsin. The captain, George R. Donner, was exhausted. He had spent hours navigating the ship through treacherous ice floes. As they neared the center of the triangle, he told his second mate to wake him when they reached their destination. Donner retired to his cabin and locked the door from the inside. 3 hours later, as the ship pulled toward the harbor, the second mate went to the captain's quarters. He knocked, no answer. He pounded, silence. Fearing the captain had suffered a medical emergency, the crew eventually broke down the heavy wooden door. The cabin was empty. The lock was still engaged from the inside. The porthole was too small for a man of Donner's stature to squeeze through. His clothes were laid out, and the room was undisturbed. Despite an exhaustive search of the ship, Captain Donner was never found. He hadn't jumped. The crew had been on deck the entire time and heard nothing. He had simply evaporated from a locked room in the middle of a haunted lake. The ghost of the Rosabelle, if the disappearance of men and planes wasn't enough, the Triangle also produces ghosts. In 1921, the Rosabelle, a sturdy schooner carrying 11 members of a religious group known as the House of David, was found floating upside down in the Triangle. When rescuers reached the ship, they were chilled by what they saw. The ship appeared to have been hit by a massive force, a collision perhaps. But there were no other ships reported missing, and no other vessel in the area showed signs of damage. The most terrifying detail, however, was the condition of the wreck. Although the ship was capsized, the crew was gone. Not a single body was found in the water. It looked as if the ship had been flipped by a giant hand, and the people inside had been plucked out like toys. The Rosabelle became a legendary omen among sailors. The lake takes what it wants, and it never gives back the bones. The underwater Stonehenge for decades. Skeptics argued that the Triangle was merely a product of bad weather and magnetic ore in the lake bed. That changed in 2007, when Mark Hawley, a professor of underwater archaeology at Northwestern Michigan College, was searching for old shipwrecks with side-scan sonar. About 40 feet below the surface of Grand Traverse Bay, he found something that didn't belong in the American Midwest. He found a series of stones arranged in a perfect circle, mimicking the structure of Stonehenge. Even more shocking, on one of the stones, there was a carving of a mastodon, an animal that has been extinct for over 10,000 years. This discovery suggested that the area within the triangle has been a site of strange, perhaps ritualistic significance since the dawn of humanity. Many believe these standing stones act as a focal point for the magnetic anomalies that plague pilots and sailors today. The science and the supernatural, what causes these events? Scientists point to psyches, sudden, massive oscillations in water level caused by atmospheric pressure changes that can act like a silent tsunami. Others point to the massive iron deposits in the lake's floor that cause compasses to deviate by as much as 20 degrees, leading pilots to fly directly into the water while thinking they are level. But the locals, they speak of time slips. They talk about the great gray man seen on the decks of ships that aren't there. They talk about the strange, glowing orbs of light that have been reported by hundreds of witnesses over the last century. Lights that move at impossible speeds before diving into the freezing water without a splash. The mystery endures today. The Lake Michigan Triangle remains an active puzzle. Every few years, a small craft goes missing, or a pilot reports losing time while flying the Manitowoc-Ludington corridor. The lake is beautiful, yes, but it is a predator. It sits in the heart of America, a vast inland sea that keeps its secrets locked behind a wall of ice and deep, crushing pressure. As you stand on the shores of Michigan or Wisconsin today, looking out at the sunset, the horizon looks peaceful. But remember Captain Donner's locked cabin. Remember the pulverized remains of Flight 2501. The triangle doesn't just sink ships, it erases them. The stones of the primordial deep, the Michigan Stonehenge, while the disappearances of the 20th century are chilling. The triangle's strangeness may actually date back to the dawn of human civilization. In 2007, Mark Hawley, a professor of underwater archaeology, was conducting a routine survey of the lakebed in Grand Traverse Bay, a finger of water that jabs into the heart of the triangle's northern boundary. Using side-scan sonar to search for shipwrecks, Hawley's team spotted something that looked suspiciously like a geometric pattern on the lake floor, 40 feet below the surface. When divers went down to investigate, they didn't find a shipwreck. Instead, they found a perfectly aligned circle of stones. The stones were massive, some weighing several tons. They weren't natural rock formations, they had been placed there. But here is the part that defies history. The stones were submerged under 40 feet of water. For those stones to have been placed there by humans, the lake level would have had to be significantly lower, meaning these stones were likely arranged 10,000 years ago, during the last ice age. The crown jewel of this discovery was a single large boulder. On its surface, weathered by millennia of currents, was a petroglyph. It wasn't a fish or a bird. It was a clear, unmistakable carving of a mastodon, an animal that has been extinct in North America for nearly 10,000 years. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. It suggests that the Lake Michigan Triangle wasn't just a site of modern glitches in time, but perhaps a sacred or energetic vortex recognized by the Paleo-Indians. Was the site a hunting ground, a calendar, or something more esoteric? To this day, the exact coordinates are kept secret by the researcher to prevent looters from disturbing what might be the oldest man-made structure in the United States. The 1994 UFO wave. When the radar confirmed the impossible, if the stories of the triangle were just folklore, they would eventually fade. But in March 1994, the mystery became a matter of official government record. Over the course of several nights, hundreds of residents across the Michigan coast, from Ludington down to the Indiana border, reported seeing strange, glowing orbs of light. These weren't shooting stars or planes. Witnesses described them as giant, pulsating spheres that moved in unnatural zigzag patterns before hovering stationary over the lake. The sightings became so frequent that the National Weather Service in Muskegon took notice. A veteran radar operator named Jack Bushong watched his screen in disbelief. He saw a cluster of objects moving at speeds that defied the physics of any known aircraft. "I've never seen anything like it," Bushong later recounted. These things were moving at 72,000 miles per hour, then stopping on a dime. They were jumping 20 miles in a second. Bushong tracked the objects as they converged over the center of Lake Michigan, the very heart of the triangle. He contacted the control tower at the nearby airport, but they had no commercial traffic in the area. The objects weren't just lights, they were solid masses reflecting radar waves. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they dove toward the water and vanished from the radar. This 1994 event remains one of the most well-documented UFO cases in American history, backed by both credible witnesses and technical radar data. It solidified the theory that the triangle isn't just a place where things disappear, but perhaps a doorway where things enter. The legend of the Three Sisters and the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, no discussion of the Lake Michigan Triangle, and the Great Lakes at large is complete. Without the chilling reality of the Three Sisters, while not a supernatural ghost, this phenomenon is a unique, terrifying quirk of the Great Lakes physics that has claimed hundreds of lives within the triangle's zone. The Three Sisters are a series of three massive rogue waves that hit in quick succession. Because the Great Lakes are shallower than the ocean, the waves are steeper and hit much faster. When the first wave hits a ship, the deck is flooded. Before the water can drain, the second wave hits. By the time the third wave, the third sister, arrives, the ship is so heavy with water that it is driven straight to the bottom like a stone. This is what many believe happened to the SS Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975, and many other ships within the triangle. On November 10, 1975, the 729-foot titan of a ship was battling 30-foot waves and 70-knot winds. The captain, Ernest M. McSorley, famously radioed, "We are holding our own." Minutes later, the ship vanished. There was no distress call. No mayday. The ship was snapped in two by the sheer force of the water and plummeted 530 feet to the lake floor. When divers eventually found the wreck, the clock in the galley was stopped at the exact moment of impact. The Great Lakes do not have the luxury of vast ocean depths. When a ship goes down here, it hits the bottom with a violence that often leaves no survivors and no time for a final word. The vanishing of the Thomas Hume. A century of silence, the triangle's history is littered with Mary Celeste scenarios. In May 1891, the schooner Thomas Hume was sailing across Lake Michigan with a crew of 7. The weather was brisk but not life-threatening. The ship was empty, returning to Muskegon to pick up a load of lumber. The ship never arrived. For 115 years, the Thomas Hume was the ultimate ghost story. People claimed it had been swallowed by a waterspout or taken by a rip in the sky. It wasn't until 2006 that a team of divers finally located the wreck. But the discovery only deepened the mystery. The ship wasn't smashed to pieces. It was sitting perfectly upright on the lake floor, 150 feet down. Its masts were still standing. Its anchor was still stowed. Even the crew's clothing and tools were still inside. There was no sign of a collision, no fire, and no struggle. The 7 men who sailed her had simply disappeared. There were no bodies found in or around the wreck. It was as if the crew had been lifted off the deck, leaving the ship to drift and eventually settle into its icy grave. Why is the triangle so deadly? Skeptics and scientists have struggled to find a one-size-fits-all explanation for why this specific patch of water is so hungry. 1. Magnetic anomalies. Some geologists point to the massive iron ore deposits in the Michigan Basin. These deposits create magnetic declination, where a compass needle can jump or spin. In the days before GPS, a pilot or captain relying on a compass would be led miles off course, often straight into the rocky shoals of the Wisconsin coast. 2. Methane hydrates. Much like the theory for the Bermuda Triangle, some suggest that pockets of methane gas trapped under the lakebed occasionally burst. This would turn the water into a frothy soup that has no buoyancy, causing even the largest ships to sink instantly without warning. 3. The Witch of November. The Great Lakes sit at a crossroads of 3 different air masses. Cold, dry air from the Arctic, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. and intense jet streams from the Pacific. When these collide over the triangle, they create inland hurricanes that can sink a ship in seconds. A final thought from the shore: if you visit the Michigan coast today, you'll see families playing in the sand and tourists taking photos of the picturesque lighthouses. But the locals, the ones whose families have lived there for generations, know better. They know that the lake has a memory. They tell stories of the Great Gray Man, a misty figure seen on the decks of modern ships just before a disaster. They talk about the silence, a phenomenon where the sounds of the wind and the waves suddenly stop, leaving a traveler in a vacuum of absolute stillness before a slip occurs. The Lake Michigan Triangle is more than just a collection of shipwrecks. It is a reminder that even in the heart of a modern, industrialized nation, there are places where nature, or something beyond nature, still holds the ultimate authority. The lake is cold, it is deep, and it is waiting. The bending of time, a pilot's nightmare. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Lake Michigan Triangle isn't what is found at the bottom, but what happens in the air above it. In the late 1970s, a private pilot, whose name has been preserved in regional folklore as Captain Miller, was flying a small Cessna from Wisconsin toward the Michigan shoreline. The sky was a flawless, bruised purple as the sun began to set. Midway across the lake, Miller noticed his compass began to wander. It didn't just spin, it drifted lazily, as if the North Pole had suddenly decided to take a vacation. Then, the horizon vanished. Not into a cloud, but into a thick, luminous, milky mist that seemed to glow from within. Miller reported that his electronics went silent. His watch, a mechanical wind-up, stopped dead at 6:42 p.m. For what felt like 10 minutes, he flew through a vacuum where sound seemed muffled, as if he were wrapped in cotton. When he finally punched through the mist, he saw the lights of Ludington, Michigan. But when he landed and checked the hangar clock, it was 8:15 p.m. He had been in the air for over an hour longer than his fuel or his memory accounted for. He had lost over an hour of his life in a span of miles that should have taken 20 minutes. These time slips are a recurring theme in triangle lore, leading some theorists to suggest that the magnetic anomalies of the lake don't just mess with needles. They warp the fabric of space-time itself. The sentinels, hauntings of the Big Sable Point while the water claims the ships, the lighthouses along the triangle's edge stand as silent, often haunted witnesses. Big Sable Point Lighthouse, a towering black and white striped sentinel near Ludington, is said to be the epicenter of this land-based strangeness. Keepers over the last century have reported heavy footsteps on the spiral iron stairs when no one else was in the building. Others have seen a great gray man standing on the gallery, looking out toward the exact spot where Flight 2501 vanished. The theory among local paranormal investigators is that the triangle acts as a battery, storing the frantic energy of thousands of souls lost to the cold water and playing it back like a haunted recording. The modern mystery: why can't we solve it? In an age of Starlink satellites, GPS, and high-resolution sonar, you would think the Lake Michigan Triangle would be debunked. Yet it remains stubbornly defiant. In 2021, a high-tech search for the wreckage of Flight 2501 used the latest autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs. They mapped miles of the lakebed with centimeter-level precision. They found old anchors, small debris, and even a few previously unknown 19th-century shipwrecks. But the DC-4, a massive four-engine airliner, still missing. It is as if the lake has a digestion process. It takes the metal, the glass, and the bone, and it weaves them into the silt until they become part of the earth itself. Conclusion: the heart of the continent, the Lake Michigan Triangle, is a reminder that we don't need to travel to the middle of the Atlantic or the depths of the Amazon to find the unexplained. It sits right in the American Midwest, surrounded by cherry orchards, bustling cities, and summer vacationers. It is a place where the 10,000-year-old carvings of mastodons sit beneath the flight paths of modern jets. It is a place where a captain can vanish from a locked room and a plane can be pulverized into dust. It is a vast, inland sea that refuses to be tamed by the 21st century. As the sun sets over the Wisconsin shore, casting long, golden shadows across the water toward Michigan, the triangle remains. It is beautiful, it is terrifying, and above all, it is silent. The secrets of the 58 souls of Flight 2501, the crew of the Rosabelle, and Captain Donner are safe beneath the waves. The lake doesn't care about our technology or our curiosity. It only knows the cold, the wind, and the long, slow passage of time. Thanks for watching.